dioxide, or CO2, is the main greenhouse gas in climate change. So how does CO2 get into our atmosphere? Well, carbon is part of a cycle. It starts with the sun, which heats the Earth's surface with more energy in 1 hour than the whole world uses in a year. Plants, which are kind of like biological chefs, take that sunlight, and then suck in some CO2 from the air, mix them together, and bam! They create a stored form of energy, in the form of carbohydrates such as glucose and sucrose. The process is called photosynthesis. When animals like us eat those plants, our stomachs convert that food back into energy for our own growth. Greenhouse gases are a byproduct of this process, and are released through waste. If those plants die, they decompose, and tiny microorganisms break down those carbohydrates and again, release greenhouse gases as a byproduct. As you see, energy originates from the sun. It is then transferred as it moves through the food chain. But sometimes, carbon-based organisms like plants or animals get stuck in the earth. When this happens, they're compressed under tons of pressure, and turned into carbon-based fossil fuels like oil, coal or natural gas.
So, happiness economics can help us get to these questions, and I'll try to give you some examples of this. Now, even though there's a lot of skepticism, originally about using this surveys what people say make them happy. The number of reasons that we are getting increasingly confident in doing so. One is that the consistent pattern, remarkable consistent pattern, determines well-being across large samples of people, across countries, across the world, and over time. Some of the basic things that make people happy, and I will show you some of these: income, health, marital status, employment status. Some of these very basic things are remarkably consistent across countries, across world. So that gives us some sense that these surveys are picking up consistent patterns. And when we know what consistent patterns are, we can look how other things that very much more affect people's well-being. The environment and equality, the nature's institution raging on living, and all kinds of other things that very much more. English, as you have already read, is not a pure language. I don't think there really are any pure languages in the world. But English is definitely not a pure language. English, in fact, has borrowed from over 350 languages in its history. So, it's a variety of many languages. Some people say it's like a dog, a mongrel dog, a dog that has been made up of many different dogs. The English language is like that. By looking at the history of the English language, we learn about the history of the English people. The two things are closely connected. So, in fact, today we are not only learning about language but we are learning about history. The fact that English has borrowed words from over 350 languages has been viewed differently throughout history. So, for example, in Shakespeare's time, people were very angry about words which were not, they thought, original English words. Words which came from other languages, they didn't like them.
It is a practical way for ordinary people to protect the ecosystem by simplifying daily lives. There are many things that we can do for preserving our blue planet. For example, we can work from home, as well as we would tend to purchase local foods like fresh vegetables and meats, rather than buying foreign or non-local commodities. Because frequent transportation inevitably causes more CO2 emission. This is an essential reason why we should simplify our lifestyle in order to reduce exhausting gas emission. If everyone can change thinking pattern to live, work and study simply, the environmental issues will be solved easily. On the other hand, many applied sciences and technologies have served human for a long time. For example, aircraft were invented by scientists, and manufactured by engineers. The planes have been flying for many years and departing from many locations on the Earth. However, the gas emission of aeroplanes has a serious impact on the environment, and led to the greenhouse effect. This effect successively triggers many natural disasters, including global warming, drought, flooding and so on. Fortunately, many cutting-edge technologies have been invented by scientists and technologists. These new applications can help humanity to cope with imbalanced ecosystem problems. For example, internet applications can help people to reduce long-distance traveling by flight, such as the Zoom, a kind of video conferencing tool. As well as the new recipe.
Sweetened condensed milk is a good ingredient for sweet recipes because of all the added sugar, about 25% by weight. But when sweetened condensed milk was invented in the 1800s, the original reason for adding sugar to the milk was not for flavor, but for protection against spoilage. And it works, even after you open the can, sweetened condensed milk keeps longer than fresh milk. That added sugar kills bacteria that would otherwise digest the milk and spoil it. The sugar kills not by poisoning the bacteria, but by a more direct physical process. It draws water out of the bacteria so the bacterial cells shrivel and die. Each bacterial cell has a sort of skin, technically, a membrane. Water can pass through this membrane pretty easily, but substances dissolved in the water can't. Water has a natural tendency to move toward any region where there's a high concentration of dissolved substances. A bacterial cell in a can of sweetened condensed milk finds itself immersed in an extremely concentrated solution of sugar. Water inside the cell will, therefore, pass out through the cell membrane into the sugar solution. The bacterial cell dehydrates and dies in a sea of sugary water. Sugar added to fruit has the same effect. That's the idea behind fruit preserves. Other foods are preserved with salt, exploiting the same principle.
What is precipitation? Clouds hold millions of tiny water droplets. Over time, a cloud can hold more and more tiny droplets of water and pieces of ice. Wind and temperature make the droplets and pieces bump into each other. They then group together, they get bigger and heavier until they are too heavy to stay in the cloud. They fall to the ground as something called precipitation. Precipitation can include rain, snow, hail or sleet. Precipitation can form into different types. This is because the differences in temperatures. If the air between the cloud and the ground is warm, the precipitation will fall as rain. If the rain freezes between the cloud and the ground, it becomes sleet. If the air is in the cloud and it blows very cold, the precipitation will fall as snow. Hail forms when ice crystals get blown upward inside of a cloud over and over. The ice will get bigger and bigger each time until it finally falls from the sky. Sleet is smaller than hail. Sleet falls in cold weather. Precipitation comes from storms. Thunderstorms are the most common type storm. They are caused when warm, wet air hits cold, dry air. The warm, wet air rises fast to form huge clouds. Humans are pretty lucky with the way we can communicate. Unlike animals, we have the perfect length necks and excellent control of our breaths. Both of these characteristics allow us to form words. Although animals can't talk like us, they still have special ways to communicate. For example, dolphins have one of the most sophisticated forms of communication. They make distinct whistling sounds that help identify themselves. Dolphins may also squeak or yelp depending on the situation. Nevertheless, each sound releases meaningful information. You have probably heard some birds say words just like us, but they are merely repeating what they hear. Most birds communicate through songs and squawks that can be beautiful for us to listen to. Other animals communicate without making a sound. Elephants show affection by wrapping their trunks around each other. Whales leap out of the water to send messages to their friends. Bees perform a special dance when they have located nectar in a tree. Even if it's just our pet dog wagging his tail or a pet cat purring, all animals have their own way to convey information to us and each other.